One of the things that we're particularly excited about here in the Lower Delaware River, the wild and scenic Lower Delaware River, is that we are starting to see signs of recovery. We are starting to see the fruits of our labor under the Clean Water Act. The Clean Water Act was not just a piece of paper in Washington, it's actually biologically meaningful right here in our Delaware River. And one of the signs that we're seeing is that plants and animals that haven't been here for a long time, that suffered under the gross pollution in the mid-1900s, are actually starting to make their way back in the river. And this is demonstrated better with one species of plant, Podostemum ceratophyllum, than it is with any other plant and animal, particularly because this plant is more sensitive than any plant or animal that we know in the Delaware River to particular types of industrial pollution, acid mine drainage, coal, the various industrial footprints that we have throughout the watershed. This plant dies off almost immediately when exposed to that type of industrial waste. But here in the Lower Delaware River, we are starting to see this plant come back. And what's really extraordinary is that the last time biologists were able to find this plant was literally during the Civil War. The 1860s, the 1870s, and the 1880s are the last time this aquatic plant was found in this stretch of the Delaware River. And so it is no exaggeration to say that for the first time in 150 years, we are starting to see Podostemum ceratophyllum, Podostemum, make its way back into the Delaware River and start to contribute to the ecology of this great river. Again, the Clean Water Act is working. It is challenging. There are fights every day of every year to make sure that our water is protected. The Delaware Riverkeeper played a critical role in making sure the Lower Delaware River got special protection water status, an anti-degradation protection through the Delaware River Basin Commission. But it's not enough. We need to keep on fighting, and those fights are starting to pay dividends. We are starting to, again, to see some life return that hasn't been present in this part of the Delaware River for 150 years. We're really excited to see it. It's hopeful, it is meaningful, and it adds wind to our sails as we continue to try to protect this amazing wild and scenic Delaware River. One of the most amazing things about Podostemum, this plant threadfoot or riverweed, is that it is unusual in so many ways compared to the other aquatic plants in the Delaware River and elsewhere. It provides habitat, it provides food. It is really, literally quite unique in its ability to contribute to the full ecosystem function of the Delaware River. First of all, it's a specialist in flowing areas. Unlike a lot of aquatic plants that grow in lakes or in still water, backwater areas, this plant actually, like this riffle here, thrives in fast flowing areas, like other plants in the family of Podostemaceae. And so normally these types of riffles have smooth rocks as the flow scours these rocks. And the first thing that Podostemum does is it actually creates a much more complex habitat for aquatic insects, for fish to thrive, as it forms this dense matrix, almost like an astroturf on the river, but porous astroturf, so that bugs and fish can actually work their way through it. And so first of all, it forms this amazing and new habitat type in these fast-flowing areas of the Delaware River. The second part of it is that, unlike almost all of the other aquatic plants, it doesn't have a lot of chemical defenses. And so because of that, it is actually much more edible than other species of aquatic plant for waterfowl like geese and ducks, for aquatic insects and aquatic invertebrates in the stream. And so even though a lot of aquatic plants are somewhat inaccessible, and you'll see big beds of aquatic plants in lakes and backwater areas of the river, they tend not to get eaten by very many animals, either terrestrial animals or aquatic animals. But Podostemum is unusual in that way, is it contributes to the food web. It is an edible form of a flowering plant. Even though it looks like an alga, it grows like a moss, an encrusting moss over the rocks, it actually is quite edible and an important part of both habitat and food for this ecosystem. When it's gone, it's an entire niche that is missing from the Delaware River. As it returns, it actually adds to the complexity and the biodiversity of this amazing Delaware River. So some of the threats that we see throughout the watershed, but particularly in the Delaware River, are expanding quarries, again, an industrial activity, and the reuse of old quarries for things like asphalt plants. Again, those are highly invasive industries. They can have severe detrimental effects on the aquatic biology for plants like Podostemum ceratophyllum. Similarly, we're seeing a greater push for these massive warehouse development projects near the Delaware River, on our streams and tributaries to the Delaware River. These are huge industrial facilities with all kinds of problems in terms of the pollution that comes off of them, particularly the stormwater runoff, impacts species such as Podostemum ceratophyllum. Similarly, the investment in fossil fuels, in fracking, in natural gas pipelines, in all of the infrastructure also threatens sensitive species such as Podostemum here in the Delaware River and in all of our tributaries. One of the things that's important to also point out about Podostemum is that it's not doing well everywhere. The Delaware River is the only known population of Podostemum in the state of New Jersey, and so it would be great if we could expand the populations in New Jersey. A professor at Albright College, Susan Munch, also documented back in the 1990s how Podostemum is declining statewide in the state of Pennsylvania. There are many places where Podostemum has been present historically where it has now disappeared. And so the story of Podostemum recovering here on the Lower Delaware River is important, and it's important to continue to document that and to help restore all of our rivers and streams. But we also have much work to do throughout our states to make sure that this story of restoration is happening everywhere and not just here in the main stem Delaware River.